Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished professional from Athens, Greece, Myrto Legaki. Myrto, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. Myrto is the leadership and a corporate well-being consultant. So my first question to you is, tell me about your journey into becoming a leadership and corporate well-being consultant.
Well, I started in the corporate world, working within corporates for many years, 15 years before I started doing what I do. So my first degree was in corporate finance, and then I got an MBA at Boston University in the US, and then I started working as a management consultant for financial services in New York. So certainly a very demanding, let's say, industry with quite strict and quite high levels of stress. And so then my work took me to London, where I turned into marketing strategy for telecoms, and then back in Greece. So during my career, I came across, many different industries. And as a consultant, of course, I saw many clients and managing different diverse teams and leadership roles. But what happened was during that journey, since, as I said, it was in quite stressful environments. And mind you, that was quite a few years ago, where we weren't talking about workplace well-being. There was no talk about mental health in the workplace. So things were a bit different back then. It was sort of the motto of work hard, play hard, or let's say work harder. So at some point, that was 14 years ago, I faced burnout, because what happens is when we deal with chronic stress, and if it's not properly addressed, that kind of catches up with us. So I faced burnout. That was 14 years ago. And that's when I started realizing that I need to approach my life and my work and my responsibilities in a different way, with more balance and greater emphasis on well-being and mental health. And that's when I started trying to find ways to support myself. And I started practicing mindfulness. And I'm sure you're it comes from your parts of the world, because these are practices of self-awareness that are based in ancient practices. So this is what kind of helped me transform my life. And as I was transforming and finding the voice within me, and also learning how to support myself better, I realized that there were so many of these practices and things that I was learning that would be useful for my colleagues or the people that I was working with. And at some point, I sort of made the decision to leave the corporate world and train again in delivering and coaching self-awareness-based practices in the workplace, but also with individuals. And I trained again as a mindfulness practitioner at the University of Massachusetts Medical School and at Brown University School of Public Health. And through that, we've developed programs that are leadership programs and corporate well-being programs that are based on self-awareness, that support leaders across the world to feel better, but also work better. And so this is the way that I came through to be a consultant.
Absolutely fascinating
experience. And also, yes.
But tell me, Myrto, what are the core principles of effective leadership in today's corporate world? And then we can move on to other questions.
Well, there's lots of core principles that are important for effective leadership, but I think that I will start with self-awareness. There's no leadership without self-awareness.
Right.
If we're not aware of our emotions, our bodily sensations, so how the world is impacting us, our needs, our thoughts, our patterns, and how these impact our behaviors, and how these behaviors impact others, then we're in no position to lead anyone, not even ourselves, but let alone others. So I would say that effective leadership starts with knowing yourself and having both internal and external self-awareness. So the ability to understand what is going on inside of us as leaders, but also how this behavior and these choices that we make affect the people around us. And it's really interesting because I don't think we would be talking about this as one of the most important core leadership skills a few years ago. But the fact is that studies have consistently been showing that leaders with a high degree of self-awareness are, in fact, more effective. They are, in fact, more empathetic, and they are, in fact, more capable of inspiring their teams to achieve more significant results. In fact, there's research that shows, and that I love when we're able to quantify this, that leaders that are ranked in the top quartile of self-awareness are 10% more effective in their roles than those in their bottom quartile. It might not seem like a big number, but it is if we think about it. If we think about how understanding more about yourself and the world around you actually makes you a better leader.
Excellent.
So I would start with self-awareness. And I would also add empathy. Again, one would think that empathy is a soft skill. And I get a little bit flustered now when I hear about these qualities being called soft skills, because they are anything but soft.
Correct.
I love that. I read a quote by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who is a big proponent of empathy and self-awareness in leadership. And he actually said, and I love this, that empathy is not a soft skill. It's in fact the hardest skill that we learn, the way to relate to our world and relate to the people that matter the most to us. And he also said that empathy is at the root of innovation. Right. So I would add that empathy is the next most important skills. And again, why am I saying this? And that it's also supported by a lot of research. I was recently working with Ernst & Young here in Greece with a team of leaders, or the partners of the team here in Greece. And we talked about a recent study that was delivered in the US in 2023. And again, the studies show that having an empathetic leader leads to 85% higher productivity, 87% higher job satisfaction. And again, such high numbers with innovation and creativity. Yeah. So it's not just a nice to have, but it's something that will improve our performance in our team and our organization.
Well said. My next question is, since you've spoken of self-awareness and empathy, what role does emotional intelligence play in leadership? And how can leaders develop it?
Well, self-awareness is, in fact, the cornerstone of emotional intelligence. Yeah. Emotional intelligence is our ability to be in contact with our emotions, to recognize them in our body, because they actually live in our body. They're created in our body and they live in our body, and actually be able to name them. And then in the same way, to be able to understand emotions that are happening in the people around us. So the cornerstone of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. So in fact, I love that Daniel Goleman, who's the father of emotional intelligence, talks about with his research that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. So it's a really important trait to have. And the other side, just like Satya Nadella mentioned, it's a difficult trait to develop, right? These are soft skills, but they're also hard skills. So it's not easy to just say, it's not about reading a lot and then, all of a sudden I'm going to do that workshop or attend that training or read a bunch of articles or a book, and all of a sudden I'm going to have emotional intelligence. It's something that we need to cultivate constantly, and we need to consciously put our intention into having more emotional intelligence. So there's some things that we can do. Again, as I said, number one is to develop self-awareness. And the way to develop self-awareness is actually to start noticing.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. So, we've spoken of self-awareness, empathy, and emotional intelligence. But what would you say, Myrto, is the relationship between leadership and corporate well-being?
Well, that's another one that's really important. Because if our people in our companies are not well, nothing can be done, right? And companies are just groups of people. So well-being is really an integral part of performance in a company. And we know that, especially after the pandemic, burnout numbers have been on the rise. workplace stress is increasing. I was just reading a study by SHRM, and in the US, again, these are US numbers, 44% of workers are feeling burnt out. This is a huge number.
Yeah.
And the numbers are even higher with women leaders or women workers. So workplace well-being is really important. And we know that it's directly related to performance. So we know that recent, and this is a study that was done last year, and I love this because it's the first study that actually shows with numbers the direct correlation of workplace well-being to company performance. So if anyone else isn't convinced about investing in corporate well-being, maybe this study will help them. It's a study, again, by Oxford University, and it showed that companies that have higher levels of workplace well-being, so it's a combination of how their workers feel about their health, physical and mental health, shows that they have direct correlation to firm valuation, stock performance, return on assets, and company profits. And on the one hand, research shows that a lot of leaders report that prioritizing employee well-being can give the organization a competitive advantage. But on the other hand, only a very small percentage, perhaps a third of leaders actually make it a priority. So while we know now with numbers and with research that corporate well-being is an important part, a strategic part of the way we approach our HR policies and our company culture, there's a little emphasis being put in actually investing in well-being and investing in mental health and wellness. But it's absolutely imperative.
Great response. Thank you. Can you also then talk about the importance of mental health in the workplace? Because there's a lot of discussion all over the world on how important mental health is. And obviously after COVID, people have started understanding how critical mental health is.
Exactly. COVID actually showed us that mental health or corporate well-being is not a nice to have. It's actually imperative to leading our companies. So the numbers also show there that instances of mental health issues are rising in the workplace. I mean, workplaces are just microcosms of the general society, and all over the world after the pandemic, the instances of psychological issues and mental health issues has increased. So that is depicted also in the workplace. We run some very effective psychological safety and mental health programs that are actually eye-opening for organizations, because what we see typically is that although these mental health issues are evident in workplaces, they're there. There's still stigma associated with mental health issues in the workplace. It's a taboo. We don't talk about them. And what happens is they start to become an impediment to doing our job, because typically what happens is leaders are not empowered and they're not informed as to how better to approach mental health issues in the workplace. So what has become evident is that we need to put more and more emphasis into educating our workforce about mental health issues in the workplace, destigmatizing them, and creating psychological safety in our teams so that people are open to talk about it when they're not feeling well. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to be able to talk about it. And then empowering and educating people managers, first of all, to spot any signs of mental health issues in their team, to be able to recognize the signs within their people, and then to be able to take a step back and create a plan into how to better approach these people in their team to support them better for their own good, but also for the good of the team and the organization.
Well said. Well said. Moving on, Myrto, what role does neuroscience play in understanding and improving corporate well-being?
Yes, well, this is something that actually I didn't ever expect that I would come to, especially coming from, let's say, the part of mindfulness and self-awareness, because I was kind of seeing the effects of applying more self-awareness and empathy and attention and focus on day-to-day work, but I wasn't aware of what was happening in the background. So through my training and what we know now, when we have more knowledge about the way our brain works, our wiring, and the way different parts of the brain interact with each other, we're more empowered to understand better our behaviors and the way we react to situations and the challenges of daily life and work. So, for example, in our workshops, what we do when we talk about neuroscience, when leaders or individual contributors, it doesn't matter, when we hold workshops about mental health, psychological safety, and well-being, when participants learn about the physiology and biology of stress and the impact of particularly chronic stress, for which we are all sort of suffering, most of us in the modern world, and when they understand what the wiring of our brain is happening when we're facing stress and chronic stress, then it kind of becomes something that they can deal with. It becomes something that is manageable. It's not something out there that is very difficult, that is plaguing them. It's like a dark cloud, stress, chronic stress, anxiety. I don't know what to do about it. So when we know the mechanics behind it, we are more equipped and empowered to manage the situations and to manage the challenges better. And as scientists and as leaders, or for myself as a coach, when I use these neuroscience findings and this information, it helps me support any suggestions or tips or solutions that I give to my clients and coachees, and substantiated with scientific evidence, so that it makes the option or the choice of following these suggestions stronger. So it helps also with adopting different behaviors.
Right. Very interesting. And what advice would you have for leaders dealing with high stress environments and decision-making under pressure, which seems to be a norm now in the world today?
Indeed, because we also know that the higher the stress levels, the more impacted our decision-making capabilities. Again, knowing about which parts of the brain are affected when we're facing stress, either acute or chronic stress, we know that these parts of the brain that are activated, such as the amygdala or the limbic system, the lower parts of the brain, tend to kind of hijack the wiser parts of our brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, sort of the higher brain here, which are the parts of our brain that actually help us make wiser decisions and sort of pull together all of our knowledge, and with emotional regulation and let's say equanimity, be able to make the best decisions. So when we're stressed, we decide better. So the tip is actually to basically find some time to stop. There's a great practice that is called STOP, which basically is about stopping, not taking any action if possible, although sometimes it's difficult because we're so reactive and we work so much on autopilot that it's hard to take a step back and not react when something stressful happens or we need to make a decision. But I would first say stop, don't make any decision. Second is take a breath. So take one conscious breath, inhaling slowly and then exhaling even slower. If you can, take 2 breaths. If you can, take 3 breaths. The more breaths you take, it's better. But we know from research that even taking one conscious breath has the power to change the chemical balance in our brain and actually deactivate the stressful parts of our brain so we can make better decisions. And then observe. So the third step is observe. Observe 3 things. Observe what your bodily sensations are. So what does your body tell you? Second is observe what your thoughts are happening, what thoughts are happening in your brain, in your mind. And the third is observe your emotions. And once we do that, what happens is we take a step back and we become the one who observes rather than the one who is consumed by the stress. And we're forced to make a decision even if we're not ready, right? So we step back and observe. And then the third step is make that decision with much more wisdom and self-regulation and the ability to see things from both sides. Because when we're stressed, what happens is we go into what we call tunnel vision. So we focus on the stressor, on the thing that upsets, and we forget to see what's around us.
Mm-hmm.
So with this practice, we can take a step back and have a more complete view of the situation. And that's where more solutions rise up to the surface. Mm-hmm. And we avoid making rash decisions based on our reactive part of the brain.
Fascinating. So Myrto, one more question relating to team dynamics, and then I have a couple of questions for you on coaching.
Mm-hmm.
What are some common pitfalls in team dynamics? And based on all your work that you've done, how can some of these pitfalls be addressed?
Yes, well, there's lots of them. I mean, we can talk about it forever.
I know.
One of the most difficult things to do is lead a team, and especially when we're working a lot remotely or hybrid, this can be exacerbated. One of the most important pitfalls is the lack of clear goals. And that, again, stems from leadership. That's why I was saying before that self-awareness is the most important leadership skill. So I need to know that I know where I want my people to go.
Right.
So we need to have clear goals. So that's the first one. And then the other pitfall is not communicating these goals. So I'm not going to say that it's about gatekeeping, but sometimes it's about, what I see a lot is about leaders that don't have enough time. So they share, I don't have enough time to explain to everyone what is the strategy or why priorities changed. Just need to get it done, you know? So it's a combination of lack of understanding that communicating these clear goals is important to have these goals met. And also a combination of the fact that typically most of us are overworked and there's such changing priorities so fast that we don't have time to actually step back and communicate them better. And then it's about inspiring a lack of relevant motivation for every person in our team in order to inspire them to achieve these goals. So a lot of time when I see leaders is, again, going into, okay, let's talk business. Let's just get it done, you know, but it's not like that. You're not a leader if nobody's following you. You just have a title that was given to you by someone else. But if you're walking ahead and no one is following you, then you're just taking a walk. You're not a leader. So in order to have your team follow you, you need to inspire them into why should they achieve these goals. So it's lack of clear goals, lack of communicating these goals, and then lack of clear leadership when it comes to inspiring our teams.
Well said. So I have two more questions for you, and these are now to you, Myrto, personally as a coach. How has your background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Well, I love this because when I started doing what I do, I actually was thinking that all my previous work was kind of like, okay, how am I going to apply this? Because I'm working so closely with self-awareness practices and with neuroscience and psychology. But then what happens is I'm kind of using all these experiences of 15 years in the corporate world in all these different roles into informing the way I approach my clients, whether they are teams, whether they're large teams. Sometimes I teach to 2,000 or 3,000 people at a time, or whether it's working with a small leadership team or working one-on-one with an executive or a CEO. So what I do is actually practice what I teach. So I bring in my previous experience as a leader and as someone who has worked in different environments and try to sort of get into the other person's shoes, understand what their challenges are, and then draw upon my experience, both from the corporate world, but also from my second kind of training into how I can support them better. And because I've also worked in, let's say, that was 15 years ago, as I said, the cultures back then were quite different. I've experienced a lot of what now we would call toxic cultures. I experienced a lot of malfunctioning teams. I experienced a lot of what we should not be doing now as leaders. So I have a wealth of personal experiences and also mistakes that I've done on my own as a leader for my previous experience that I can apply into supporting my clients and my coachees and the companies that I work with better.
Amazing. And my last question for you, how have you been shaped by people in your life? And how are they influencing you as a coach today?
I love this, because I wouldn't, and nobody would be here if we hadn't allowed other people to support us to be here, right? I mean, this is the richness, and I'm eternally grateful to all my teachers, all my coaches, people that helped shape me to who I am today. So I have a few people in my life that are like beacons and are kind of inspirations about how they lead their lives, and I kind of aspire to be like them. And one of them is sort of my teacher in systemic psychotherapy, who is no longer with us, Petros Polychronis, who actually embodied what empathy, emotional intelligence, and ethos, which is integrity, which is for me one of the most important values.
Right.
And I hold him very high, let's say, into sort of teaching me, embodied teaching with his presence of what it is to be just a leader that is just, a leader that is fair, and a leader who gives opportunities to everyone if you show that you have something to offer. So this is one. And then I have one of the other leaders, one of the first leaders in my career, who showed me how important empathy, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence are by actually not exhibiting them. And I'm eternally grateful for that, because they made me better.
Yeah.
And that had a great cost. So I know what it means to lack these qualities, and actually know very well what the opposite of that sort of, let's say, leadership style would be. So it's about leadership style, and it's about skills. So I've learned from good examples. I've also learned from bad examples. And I strongly believe that no experience is ever lost, that we're always learning from our mistakes, always learning from every single person that comes across in our lives, whether it's the person who serves us our coffee in the morning every day, whether it's a leader that we go on a conference and hear them speak and inspire us, or whether it's our children. The world is full of teachers if we're ready to listen and open up and change.
Great response. And on that note, Myrto, thank you so much for speaking to me. Thank you for talking to me about leadership at such length. I love the way you so simply articulated the leadership traits, which are self-awareness, empathy, and you added emotional intelligence, which is an important part of self-awareness. Thank you also for talking to me about team dynamics, where you spoke about clear goals, not communicating adequately, and inspiring the team, which is so critical. Thank you for a lot of the ground we covered on leadership, corporate well-being, and for all the experience that you have shared with us. I'm grateful on behalf of all our viewers and listeners. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.